right there in that camera. Welcome back. This is Rosa Clemente. We're here live at the National Conference on Media Reform. This is Free Speech TV. We're streaming live on freespeech.org. Let your friends know, Facebook, Twitter, every aspect of social media. We'll be here the whole weekend with amazing plenaries, guests, and a party tonight. I like to party. David, you going to party with me tonight?
I will.
So this is our guest right now is David Cohn. He's a fellow at the Reynolds Institute of Journalism, does a lot of work around collaborative journalism, innovations, and crowdsourcing. He created a website by the name of Spot.us, which is pioneering community-funded journalism. So David, where are you from?
From Oakland, California.
You're there now?
I'm actually at the University of Missouri's journalism school right now for a fellowship, and in about a month and a half, 2 months, I'm going to go back to Oakland.
And you graduated from Columbia Journalism School?
Yeah, I got my master's in Columbia, master's in journalism at Columbia, and then undergrad at UC Berkeley.
So tell us a little bit about the work you're doing as a fellow and your overall, activist work in this media reform, media justice movement.
Sure. So I run a site called Spot Us at the URL spot.us, and we're trying to pioneer what we call community-funded reporting, which is where we distribute the cost of hiring a reporter across many different people. So 50 people putting down $10, $15 each is enough to hire a reporter to look into a story that those 50 people all think is important. So whereas normally, like, if I were the publisher, David Cohn, would decide where the money goes, and I would decide sort of what stories are or aren't important, we let the community decide, and they can do that by either donating their own money or taking a survey from one of our sponsors, and that will give them money to do it. So we also, that's like our version of advertising, except again, I'm not in charge of the advertising budget, the public is.
So can you give us an example of where this, the community collaborated journalism is happening right now, some cities or?
Sure. I mean, it's actually happening. We have stories all over the country, Florida, Pennsylvania. I'll tell you one story in Oakland after the shooting of a young man named Oscar Grant.
Yeah.
We actually had about 5 or 6 different small organizations, community organizations, Oakland Local sort of being the one in the lead, and together we raised about $4.5 grand so that they could cover the trial, which was taking place in Los Angeles. They were able to hire a reporter to cover it the whole time from an independent media perspective, as opposed to just sort of relying on the people that had money to pay a reporter in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's great. I mean, Oscar Grant was the case where a young man was, as I say, he was murdered by the BART police, and I think a lot of amazing stories came out of that from different perspectives. So that's good that you had a hand in helping facilitate what was there in the community. But some other examples of some stories. Are you doing anything around what's going on with mortgage fraud, or did I something in Florida? I could be mistaken, but
we have done some, not necessarily on mortgage fraud, but just I guess the situation of individuals. And we did a story in Los Angeles of who these people are that can't that get kicked out of their homes essentially. We've done all stories that span the gamut from environmental, criminal justice stories. Criminal justice has actually been a big one for us.
Yeah.
Voter fraud. There's a situation in Colorado where there's a very serious case of voter fraud. All kinds of stories, and in the end, it all only is possible when the community, the public, sort of gets involved and funds it, and then they also get to sort of see the process of journalism from start to finish, as opposed to just accepting, whatever happens, whatever's slapped down on their doorstep.
So what brought you to the conference, particularly, to talk about the work that you're doing, but...
Well, if anything, I'm a big evangelizer of a few things. One is just pushing the boundaries in transparency and participation in the process of journalism. That's sort of the driving force of my career. Something like this is really good because it gets a nice mix of people who are practicing journalism but don't necessarily have the baggage of old traditional journalism, and more.
Although you went to Columbia,
I sort of walk the line of both. Like I can put on my pedigree if I want.
Right.
Right. I'm also a big believer that the public takes ownership of journalism and informing themselves, and not just accept what comes from higher ground.
And I think that's great that you went to somewhere with Columbia to learn particular skills, network, that's always important. But I want to know more, because I'm starting to understand it, but I think a lot of people out there are like me. What is crowdsourcing?
Sure. So, and I was actually the research assistant on the book Crowdsourcing.
Good.
So the white, label definition of it is making an open call to the internet to do a job that was normally done by professionals. So, and then the quick explanation of it is it's the Wikipedia of everything, right? So the important thing to realize is that everybody's an expert on something, right? And particularly when we talk about journalism, I could write a story about a bridge. An engineer could write a story about a bridge as well, and the engineer would have a lot more authority than a professional journalist. Even though a professional journalist, there is a need for them, and they can craft stories really well. That's what they do really well. But bottom line, an engineer knows a lot more about what it is to build a bridge than a journalist.
No, I mean, I think what you're talking about with this collaborative journalism, to me, it's like hip hop. Everybody can have a same kind of equal space. Yeah. Everybody could figure out the best kind of position to play.
What I think is really interesting is there are certain stories that I think don't lend themselves to crowdsourcing, and there are certain stories that do, right? And in general, let's talk about crowdsourcing in general. So if we have a jar of jelly beans, and we had everybody guess how many beans there are in there, that's actually a really good example of crowdsourcing. The average would actually be very, very close to the truth. Whereas if I'm going to go under and have brain surgery, I would prefer a brain surgeon as opposed to everybody's guess about how that should happen. Or if I'm on a plane, I want a pilot, not just what everybody guesses. And the same applies to journalism. I think there are certain stories that really lend themselves to letting everybody sort of contribute. Really good example of that are, here's a story that no one independent journalist can do. And we actually did this, here's a smaller one, in Oakland, the potholes in Oakland, right? You could have one reporter try and drive around and find all the potholes, but what we did is we got 15, 20 bikers together, we all went in different directions, and we all mapped where we saw potholes. One reporter could not do that, right? What one reporter can do really well is, go to City Hall, find out where the money is, et cetera, and you put the two together, and then you've got something really powerful. A map of where all the problems are, and someone who's trying to find out from City Hall, how the hell can we fix this?
I mean, it's activist journalism. I mean, and I think it's neat. I mean, I'm a freelancer, I'm a journalist myself, and I think it's incredible what you're doing. But as we wrap up again, we've been talking with David Cohn, who's a fellow at the Reynolds Institute of Journalism, but has written for countless amounts of magazines, has created a website called spot.us, and a couple words before we go out.
I think the main thing is journalism is not passive. It never was. We thought it was, but now the important thing is for people to go out and get active, whether it's Spot Us, which I encourage, but any site. There's all kinds of sites that demand participation, and people can make a real big impact.
Thank you. I mean, I look forward to really looking more at the work that you're doing, and thank you for bringing collaborative journalism, which is what we really need more of. So again, I've been here with David Cohn. This is Rosa Clemente. We're at the National Conference on Media Reform, streaming live on Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.